All right, it looks like we're all back. It is almost 2:45. So, Ms. Zillig, I need you to raise your right hand.
Your Honor, actually, just quickly before we begin, can I note that I
Yes.
still have not received the policy documents?
Oh, okay.
You check your spam?
I can.
I did check my spam folder. They are not there.
Okay, I'll send it again.
Okay.
Additionally, Your Honor, we do have one issue. Counsel asked before we braked if whether or not anybody had a hard stop. Ms. Zillig here does have to leave by 4 p.m. today. Since she is appearing here as a courtesy, since she was not subpoenaed here today, we ask that stop deadline be honored.
Okay. We will do that. All right. Are we ready then?
Yeah, can I ask you to adjust the camera, Miss Zillig? It's there's a window behind you, and your face is sort of at the bottom. Can you adjust that at all? No.
You can't see my face?
Now we can see your face better. Yeah, it's the light behind you. Is there any way to close those?
Well, it's about literally a 20-foot window. I really can't do a whole lot about it.
So you can't reach that?
No,
Okay.
no problem.
Long day.
I'm sure we can see each other from the same window, so okay.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalties of perjury that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state your name for the record, spelling your last name.
Molly. Last name is Zillig, Z as in zebra, Illig.
And for whom are you employed?
The Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office, specifically Milwaukee County.
Okay, and what is your current job title?
I am the Chief Legal and Compliance Officer.
And how long have you held that position?
I've been in this position since early January 2019.
Okay, thank you very much. Attorney Hitchcock-Cross?
Okay, so you're a lawyer, correct?
I am a lawyer, yep.
Okay, but you also have a position as the supervisor of the Professional Standards Division, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, what is your, we're going to use the word role, what is your role in that supervision?
For the Professional Standards Division,
right.
or
I would have said duty 10 years ago. So what are your duties there?
I supervise I immediately supervise Captain Gladney, who runs the PSD division. I review instances of potential rules violations and determine if cases should be investigated. I give legal advice on cases as they are investigated and developed. I also, PSD handles the litigation and claims function for the sheriff's office. So any lawsuit that's filed against the sheriff's office filters through PSD division, and I review those and work with corporation counsel and outside counsel on all legal matters that are filed or any potential legal matters that may come up on a day-to-day basis through the Professional Standards Division.
Great, thank you. So let's focus on your role as supervisor of Mr. Novotny. Do you authorize investigations in that role?
Yeah, sometimes, sure.
Okay, is there anybody but you who can authorize investigations to begin?
The sheriff.
Okay. Have you ever known that to occur since you've been promoted to this current position?
I wasn't promoted to this current position. I don't know what he means since I was promoted.
Fine. So I'll ask that another way. Have you ever known that
Okay.
to happen since you've been the chief legal and compliance officer?
I don't recall.
Okay. So it's
And if I was unavailable, the chief deputy also would be able to do so in my absence.
okay. But it's fair to say, according to your recollection, you're the only one who authorizes investigations, correct?
No, I said that there could have been some done. I just don't recall if the sheriff has ever done that.
Right. So I don't know if you heard my question, but my question was, according to your recollection, you're the only.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. So, do you know James Lucky in any way?
Can you be more specific?
Well, it seems to me it might be a yes or no question. Do you know him in any way, or do you not know him in any way?
Well, I know he once worked here, but that's all I know.
Okay. So you know nothing more about James Lucky than the fact that he worked there at one time.
Well, you'd have to ask me specifically. I've never met him. I don't know what you mean by know him. If you are more specific, I could.
Okay. You don't know
Answer
what the word
that.
no means. Okay. So we'll ask that another way. Have you ever authored any investigations into Mr. Lucky?
Have I authored any
I'm
investigations?
sorry, authorized.
Yes, I did.
So it's fair to say you know him in that capacity, correct?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Within his, like I said, as
I'm
a
sorry.
former employee here.
Yes,
I'm
Attorney
sorry.
Lawrence.
I need to change. Can you give me a moment to change rooms? I'm still having connectivity issues again. So I'm going
Okay.
to just change locations. I give up.
No problem.
Please give me one moment.
Sure. All right.
Hopefully this is a better connection. I changed offices.
Great. So there was
Okay.
a question.
I'm squatting in a
that was
worker's
interrupted.
office.
We didn't get the answer.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I couldn't hear you.
We didn't get the answer.
Can you repeat the question since there's been a gap?
Sure. So it's fair to say that you have knowledge of Mr. Lucky through these investigations, correct?
I know of Mr. Lucky through his employment with the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office.
Great. Okay. Are you aware of any complaints made against Mr. Lucky?
Complaints made against him?
That's correct.
Yes, I am.
Okay. What is your knowledge of those complaints made against Mr. Lucky?
The only one that I can specifically recall, and not with great specification, is the complaint that came from an employee at Parade Art.
Okay. And did you prepare for your testimony here today?
I did not.
Okay. So, are you aware of any complaints by Mr. Lucky against any county employee?
You'd have to tell me what they are. It's, I've looked at hundreds of complaints, working in this capacity with the sheriff's office.
So you don't recall any specifically?
A complaint that he made?
That's correct.
Yes, I do recall a complaint that he made, but I don't recall. You'd have to ask me questions about it. What I recall about it the most is he made a complaint. I know it was investigated by investigator Scott Stiff. I recall Mr. Lucky was not very cooperative during that investigation, and that it was fully investigated and no subjects or rules violations were determined. I don't remember any specifics completely about that investigation. I recall approximately when it was. I think it was in June of 2020, which is 2.5 years ago. So I don't recall specifics other than that.
Okay. And when you say cooperative, this is a complaint that he filed, correct?
Yes, he did file a complaint.
So you're saying he was uncooperative with his own complaint, is that right?
What I recall specifically was he had made some allegations about bullying, perhaps, and harassment. Told the investigator that he had all kinds of information in his day books that deputy sheriffs are required to maintain. It's just like a small notebook to write down your daily activities. And he was asked to bring it in so it could be reviewed, because he had mentioned that he had specifics, but then he refused to do so because he said that his union rep, they were going to sue the county and the sheriff's office and green dollars, or it was just a really weird response. So I remember it. He'll be seeing green dollars or something. That's why I recall it, because I've never heard anybody talk like that before during
Okay,
an
you said the word
investigation.
dollars twice, and then there was a word in front of it I didn't hear. What was that word?
I don't remember exactly, something like green dollars or green bills or green, it was such an odd thing for somebody who made a complaint to say that. That's why I remember that, but that's the most I remember of that.
Okay, do you know who Frank Gladney is?
Yes.
Who's Frank Gladney?
He, he was a sergeant with the sheriff's office. He may be retired now, and he was the president of the union.
Okay. Do you recall authorizing any investigations into Mr. Gladney?
I don't recall if there's been any PSD investigations involving Mr. Gladney over the years.
Okay. And so therefore you wouldn't recall authorizing such an investigation?
Can you restate the question?
So my question to you was, do you recall authorizing any investigations into Frank Gladney? And you said
Like I said, I don't recall. That doesn't mean there haven't been. Like I said, every day something is being investigated. I don't specifically recall anything.
Just to correct the record, it's Frederick Gladney, not Frank.
Okay. Do you see this document?
Can you full size it or scroll up?
So I guess my first question is, do you recognize the nature of what an investigative summary is? Do you know what an investigative summary is?
Absolutely.
Okay. And you see how it says complainant?
Yep.
And that's you there, right?
Correct.
Okay. And the employee here is Frederick Gladney, Sergeant. Do you see that?
Yep.
Okay. And so would this indicate that you authorized an investigation into Mr. Gladney or something else?
Absolutely.
Okay. Does this refresh your recollection?
Well, it refreshes my recollection that, well, it doesn't refresh my recollection. It is what it is, that there was a case, this case number was opened against Fred Gladney.
Okay. But what does it mean that you're the complainant?
I authorized this investigation.
Okay, so that refreshes your recollection that you authorized this investigation or something else?
I'm sorry, what?
Does this document that you just saw refresh your recollection of whether or not you authorized an investigation into Mr. Gladney or something else?
Well, I don't know what this investigation was about because I haven't read it, but certainly I agree that I did authorize this case number for an investigation regarding Sergeant Gladney.
Objection.
Absolutely.
Can you direct the witness, please, Judge, to answer the question?
To the best that you can, please answer the question. If you don't understand the question, please let me know and we'll have him re-ask it in a different way.
Yeah,
Thank
if you
you.
can re-ask it, I thought I answered it.
No, my question is, does this refresh your recollection as to whether or not you authorized an investigation into Sergeant Frederick Gladney?
This shows me that I did authorize this investigation.
Okay. Now, does the fact that we've shown it to you, does that reflect your refresh your memory or something else?
Objection. Asked and answered. She's now answered it 3 times.
Well, she's been non-responsive 3 times.
Does-
I answered it.
Do you have any knowledge of that investigation?
I saw the face sheet of it, so I have knowledge of, I don't have any knowledge of that investigation because I don't remember every single investigation, but I admit that I did authorize that one because it says so. What it's about, I do not know.
Okay. So let's talk about the process of investigations at the Professional Standards Division, okay? So there's an investigation that's authorized, right? That's the first step in an investigation, or is there something else that starts an investigation?
No, typically that's what will start it.
Okay. So you authorize an investigation because you don't remember who else could have done it, right? Then what's the next step?
I'm sorry, you made a statement
What's
that
the
was.
next step after you authorize an investigative summary, if you know?
Objection. Mischaracterizing testimony. I think what he meant was when she authorizes an investigation, the summary comes at the end, I think, as Investigator Smoot
I got
testified
it.
to.
Fair enough. I appreciate that distinction. Thank you.
Okay.
Typically, and let me preface this with, I'm not the investigator. I just authorize them. So I'm not the person who investigates the case. But typically what will happen, relevant documents will be gathered, relevant potential rules violations will be looked at. Any witnesses will be interviewed. Typically the complainant is interviewed last. And then there will be, well, sometimes there'll be a discussion during an investigation regarding any potential areas that need to be further looked into, any legal issues that may come about into an investigation. And then the investigator will go from there.
Okay. Do you participate in any of those discussions?
Sometimes.
Okay. Why would you be participating in discussions, if at all?
If an investigator or Captain Novotny calls me with a question, it's case by case.
Okay. And then are you instructing him on is this in your role as supervisor or something else?
Well, I'm always the lawyer for the division. I don't know what you mean, something else.
Okay. Can you answer that question?
I guess you have to restate it because I don't understand.
Would your discussions with Captain Novotny be in your role as his supervisor or something else?
I'm going to object that this has been asked and the witness has asked for clarification.
Well, he asked it a little bit differently this time. We'll see if she can answer it.
I guess I don't know what you mean by something else. I don't consider my day-to-day work just because I'm somebody's supervisor. I speak with other people in the agency daily that I don't supervise. So it's not because I'm a supervisor. It could be he's got a question with the case.
Judge, can you direct her to answer the question, please? It's non-responsive.
Can you ask the question again?
Yeah.
For a third time? Okay.
Yes,
So
please.
we've got testimony from you on your discussions with other people who aren't Mr. Novotny. We've got discussions from you on your operation as an attorney for the agency. The question that I'm asking you is just to focus here on your discussions with Mr. Novotny as regarding professional standards division's investigations. Do you understand that?
Yes.
Okay. So now can you answer my question on is your discussions with are you talking with Mr. Novotny in his role of investigating and as supervisor of those investigations? Are you talking to him as Mr. Novotny's supervisor or in some other capacity?
I'm going to object that I kind of agree with the witness. It's not very clear what he's trying to get at. Is he asking her if she's providing legal advice? Then he needs to ask that directly.
I guess that's my question as well, Attorney Hitchcock Cross. Are you asking that? Is she speaking with Captain Novotny as a supervisor or as an attorney?
That's exactly the question I asked. Was are you speaking to him as a supervisor? And I've asked 3 times to him. This is the 4th time we're asking this question now. Are you speaking to him as a supervisor, ma'am?
Well, I'm going to object actually that misstates it. I mean, I think that misstates her prior testimony. She already said she's always a lawyer.
Well,
So
let's
I don't know
just
that
see how well she can answer if she talks to him as a supervisor. How does she view her position when
I'm discussing cases with him, I'm discussing them as the attorney and the legal and risk compliance advisor for the sheriff's office. A supervisor, I think more like if we're scheduling things or doing reviews or interviewing other people to work in the division. My work is as an attorney for the sheriff's office who happens to supervise 4 areas of the sheriff's office that are high legal risk and compliance issues. So does that?
Okay. So your role as a supervisor there, because what you're saying here, correct me if I'm wrong, is that you're always giving legal advice. Did I misunderstand that?
No, I'm not always giving legal advice. I mean, if we're talking about, scheduling a meeting or talking about other employees who work there, mundane supervisory things. But yeah, my job is I'm the chief legal and compliance officer for the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office.
Okay.
So
great. How about when you authorize an investigation? Are you giving legal advice then?
I would be when I'm discussing a particular case, sure.
Judge, can you direct her to answer the question, please?
Objection. He's arguing with the witness. She did answer his question. I'm sorry if he does.
No.
I would object to the request for the direction. I think it's inappropriate.
Okay. Was your question when she authorizes an investigation? What role is she in? Was that your question?
Yeah, the issue I don't think was my question. The issue was the answer. She's not answering the question. That's why I
Again, Your Honor.
objected, because it's non-responsive.
And I would object to the objection is inappropriate here.
Okay.
Okay, well, I think Ms. Zillig can answer the question if she can. If she can't, then she just needs to say so.
Can you ask the question again?
Okay. So we've already established that you're not always giving legal advice. And now we're talking about when you author or authorize an investigation, are you giving legal advice then or something else?
When I authorize them, that authorization is based on legal advice. Yes. So
Okay.
I'd say yes.
Okay. So your assumption that it's legal advice, I guess my question is how are you applying the law when you authorize an investigative summary?
Because I'm looking at perhaps, what the allegations are, and are these things that could lead to potential litigation, claims, a PRB case, an ERD case, and every one of our potential cases can lead to legal advice, especially a case involving discrimination, accusations, harassment, bullying, retaliation. Those ones are fraught with legal issues.
Okay, so it's fair to say that when you're making a authorization into an investigation, you're also considering the potential liability of the county. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Those affect your judgment on whether or not to authorize those investigations?
They don't affect my judgment. It's just part and parcel of the case.
Okay. And when somebody is alleged to have violated a rule here, which is why, or let me scratch that. Why do you authorize investigation? On what basis do you authorize investigations?
Because there has, do you mean just generally or this particular case?
Let's start with generally.
Generally, it will be because either an employee makes a complaint or a supervisor views something that could be a rules violation. So we investigate those.
Okay, so we're talking about policy rules, correct?
Milwaukee County Civil Service rules and Sheriff's Office policies.
Right.
Correct.
We're not talking about the law, correct?
Absolutely.
Right. So you're in fact applying facts to Sheriff County policy when you're determining whether or not to authorize an investigation, correct?
Well, there's some cases that could be. Discrimination cases are legal issues.
Okay.
It just depends. It depends on the case. It could be an attendance issue with an FMLA issue. Those are legal issues. ADA issues. Like it's really case by case.
So it's fair to say that your knowledge of the law influences your decisions. Isn't that true?
You'd have to be more specific in its influences.
Well, and whether or
decision.
not to authorize an investigation.
If there's any potential rules violations, we will look into cases, yes.
Yeah, so it's fair to say you're not giving legal advice, correct?
It's fair to say what?
It's fair to say that
Objection,
you're
misstates
not
prior
giving
testimony.
legal advice when you are authorizing an investigation, correct?
Objection, misstates prior testimony. He's directly contradicting her prior testimony. So arguing with the witness.
Right, because it's cross-examination.
It's not cross-examination, counsel. You subpoenaed this witness.
Yeah, party opponent.
Okay. All right. So
they've already asserted representation over this. We heard her assert representation over her at the pre-hearing. So once they do that, then she is a party opponent, and we're not going to go into whether or not she's a third-party witness. So to that extent, I am authorized to cross-examine her here. We've dealt with that last night on argumentative and so forth.
right.
Right.
So I'm just trying to make sure that I understand what she has said and what you are asking, counsel.
No, I appreciate that. I understand you have significant notes.
Okay, so she testified that her work is, well, and these are my words, foremost, she's an attorney, because she's always looking at things as part of her risk assessment and as a compliance officer. And so that was my understanding that that's how her legal advice plays into this. So
Sure, that was her first answer. And then as we
Okay.
went down and narrowed down, in fact, she testified that these aren't laws here. These are just rules and policy violations. And in fact, she's just interpreting whether or not they're policy violations. But she also testified that she's not giving legal advice to anybody, that she just has in the back of her mind whether or not that there's these laws and that those affect her decisions. She certainly didn't testify that she had given legal advice to anybody, and that these are an act of a lawyer as opposed to an act of an authorization of a functionary here, a bureaucrat.
Well, I gave the testimony. I certainly didn't say any of that.
Okay, let's just move on to the next question, please.
But I just need to, for tone and tenor purposes here, I got to object. I mean, not only do we get interrupted constantly, but every time, we get to something that's uncomfortable for them, we're being asked to move on. And we're generally happy to be courteous about that, but, we really have to show that this is abusive, the tone and tenor of these proceedings are being affected by it. So,
I understand.
I appreciate that. Okay. Then I'll also note it's late in the day, and we've had a lot going on here. So I'll try to switch gears, but I do feel like we're not being allowed to put on our case. Okay.
All right, so noted.
Thank you. So let's just sort of move on here. You've authorized an investigation. Investigation happens. Investigation by the Professional Standards Division is completed. What happens next, if you know?
It just depends on the case. What case do you want to?
Okay, a non-attendance case. Let's start with that.
I mean, every case is different, and like I said, I'm not the investigator on the case, so you'd have to just specifically ask me what I'm sorry, I can't answer that question.
Why not?
Because I said, all cases are different.
Okay. So is there a general standard of what happens or something else?
I mean, it really depends on a case. If the case, sometimes cases are investigated and the case is determined that there are no rules violations, and that case will then be over. Sometimes there's a determination that there's enough to move the case forward in the process, and that one will go forward. Sometimes there's not enough even in the beginning to make it even as far as either of those two situations.
Okay.
Sometimes the decision is said, we need to get more information. I mean, there's just so many different things that can happen. That's why I answered it like that.
Okay, I appreciate that. So, do you know who Danita Ball is?
Yes, I do.
Oh, okay. Who's Danita Ball?
She's the sheriff.
Okay. And before she was the sheriff, what was she, say, in June of 2021?
She was the chief deputy.
Okay. And at that time, say in June of 2021, did you give investigative reports to Danita Ball prior to her disposition of them and final review before giving them to the sheriff?
I think I understand your question. Some cases the chief deputy got involved with, and some cases she did not.
Okay, what's the distinction?
And so she reviewed, let me back up. After the cases that were going to go to the sheriff, the cases went to the chief deputy next for her review. There was a point in time, and I don't remember when she did not get involved with non-attendance cases, but I don't recall when that was.
Okay. Could that have been in June of 2021?
I really don't know.
Okay, whatever the time period, what would have been your role in dealing with those investigations prior to giving them to Danita Ball dealing with them?
After, do you mean like the cases that, are you talking about the cases that go all the way through the process? Like I said, there's cases that just, the investigator determines there's not enough here for it to move on. Are you talking about the cases that move forward?
Sure, let's talk about those cases. Yeah, those cases. What happens there?
So once the investigation is complete, I will review it. And then, like I said, they would go to the chief deputy.
Okay, and as part of your review, excuse me.
And then they would be, after she reviews them, she would, they'd go back to professional standards division to be, I don't know exactly, but I think at that point they're scheduled for the subject to review the entire case file. If the person so chooses, then it's set for a hearing date. But like I said, not all are done that way. So
Okay.
it depends on the case. They're all not handled that way.
Okay. Is it fair to say that you proofread these cases before giving them to Danita Ball?
Yeah, well, I read through them. Yeah, I read through them carefully, yes.
Okay. And so part of you reading through them carefully, you acquire knowledge and understanding of them, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. And you would have read and reviewed carefully Frederick Gladney's disposition, correct?
At the time, sure.
Okay. How about Mr. Lucky? Would you have read any dispositions into his case?
Any cases, well, it depends on, are you talking about a case that made its way through the process or a case that didn't make its way through the process?
Objection, non-responsive.
You have to be more specific. I don't know how to answer that question.
I will sustain her confusion here. So you're talking about cases that go through the system, correct?
No, I asked about any. And then
Okay,
she tried
well-
to go and pretend like there was different categories and what was I asking about and confused. And I just said any. So let's start with any and then
Okay.
we can go down to specifics.
Can
Okay.
you answer the question? I mean, ask the question again?
You don't recall the question, is that correct?
I don't.
Oh, okay. Do you recall any, in reading carefully, any complaints about Mr. Lucky?
Do I remember reading carefully any complaints?
Against Mr. Lucky. We can call them investigative summaries, predisposition, whatever you want to call it, prior to giving it to Danita Ball. How about that?
All these words have meanings in this process. That's the only reason why I'm not trying to be difficult.
So do you recall reading any complaints against Mr. Lucky?
Your Honor, if I can object, I think the witness has testified that she can't answer the question because it's too vague. Can Mr. Cross please specify what he's asking her if she read? Were they investigative summaries, complaints, or something else?
Okay, we'll start with complaints. The word I used. Do you recall any reviewing any complaints against Mr. Lucky?
Complaints that other people filed against him.
Mm-hmm.
Sitting here today, I don't
Okay.
recall specifically any.
Do you recall reading any investigative summaries against Mr. Lucky?
I don't recall any specifics sitting here today.
Okay, what generally do you recall sitting here today?
I actually don't. Like I said in the beginning, when you asked me this question before, the only thing I really recall is small parts of his complaint just because of how unusual some of the aspects were about the green dollars. But I don't remember specifics of anything.
So why was it so difficult, and why were you confused to answer my question about whether you recalled any reviewing any investigative summaries into Mr. Lucky?
I don't know how to answer that.
Okay. Do you know who Daniel Hughes is?
Yes, I do.
Who is Daniel Hughes?
He is the current chief deputy of the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office.
Okay, what was he in 6/21 of 2020?
6/21 of 2020.
That's right.
He was an inspector who oversaw the patrol division, the airport division, and ports.
Why do you remember that?
Because he just got promoted to chief deputy in the last month.
Okay. Does he work with you now?
Excuse me?
Does he work in your offices now?
Yeah, he's in our administration suite down here.
Okay. Have you discussed your testimony here today with him at all?
No.
Okay. Who is Catherine Trimboli?
She is a captain with the sheriff's office. I believe she currently works in the jail.
Okay. And again, James Novotny, do you know on June 21st of 2020 what his role with the sheriff's department would have been?
I believe he was out at patrol during that time.
Okay. So on June 21st of 2020, you weren't supervising him directly, correct?
If that was the time he was out at the patrol division, I would not have been supervising him at that time.
Okay. And do you recall whether or not he approached you about Deputy Lucky during that time?
I don't recall.
Okay. Do you recall telling him that no patrol supervisor should approach or attempt to deal with Mr. Lucky regarding his concerns or his complaints?
I don't recall telling him that. It doesn't mean I didn't, but I just don't recall it. That's a long time ago.
Okay. Why would you tell a patrol division supervisor not to respond to somebody's complaints?
Why would I tell what?
A patrol supervisor why would you tell Captain Novotny that no patrol supervisor should approach or attempt to deal with Deputy Lucky's complaints?
I'm going to object to foundation. She's already testified she doesn't recall.
But she said she may have.
Well, I said I don't recall. I mean, I could have, I might have, I might not have. I just don't recall it.
Well, do you know of a circumstance in which you might give such kind of a direction
Right.
Just in general.
in general?
Thank you, Judge.
Yeah. Typically, if there's going to be an investigation, investigation, workplace investigation, those are handled by trained, unbiased internal investigators. And typically, people's supervisors don't conduct workplace investigations because they might not be fair and impartial, and that person might not be trained in how to do them.
Okay. So based on your role as supervisor of the Professional Standards Division, do you believe that the Professional Standards Division employees are trained?
Are the PSD officers trained? I'm sorry, what?
Right. Do you believe the PSD officers are trained, have received training in their jobs?
Absolutely.
Okay. And do you believe they have knowledge of the policies that they enforce or help to enforce?
We have hundreds of policies. I guess, what do you mean by knowledge?
Do you understand the word knowledge?
Well, no, not the way you're using it here. I'm sorry.
Okay. Do you believe, we'll use the word awareness. Do you believe that PSD employees, I'm going to call them internal affairs going forward. Do you believe internal affairs employees have knowledge or awareness of the policies and procedures of the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office?
Absolutely.
Okay. And do you believe that knowledge is more than the ordinary employee has?
I think it depends on the employee, but they are trained. They go through specific training on how to investigate workplace complaints.
Okay. Do they go through specific training on the policies and procedures of the county?
Do they go through specific training on the policies?
That's right.
The investigators in PSD are involved with a lot of drafting of these policies and updating these policies. So I would say yes.
Okay. And how about, are you aware whether or not Milwaukee County has an anti-discrimination policy?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have knowledge of that policy?
I can't tell you specifically what it says off the top of my head, but I'm familiar with it.
But you're the chief legal
I
and
know.
compliance officer for the
County
department.
the county has one, and we have one too.
What does that mean? What's the one you're talking about there?
You said, didn't you say anti-discrimination?
So there's separate policies for the county and the sheriff's department. Is that right?
I believe the county has their own, yes, and we definitely have ours.
Okay. And in your role as legal and compliance officer, have you read that document before or something else?
Yeah, I've read all the sheriff's office policies.
Okay.
And
It's fair to say you have knowledge of those policies too, right?
well, I haven't committed them to memory. I would have to look one up, or you would have to show it to me if you want to ask me specific questions about it.
Great. Okay. And are you aware of whether or not there's an anti-retaliation policy at the sheriff's department?
I believe it's part of the discrimination harassment policy. I believe it's part of it.
But you don't know?
Like I said, I haven't memorized it.
Okay. In your role as proofreading complaints before they go to Deputy Ball, have you ever seen a discrimination complaint go to Miss Ball?
I don't recall.
Okay, that's because you don't recall any or something else?
I can't recall specifics right now.
Can you think of one example?
Oh, a complaint where an employee alleges that other people are discriminating against him?
No. No, that's not my question. My question is, do you recall sending any of the reports that you proofread to Chief Deputy Ball regarding discrimination?
can't recall.
Okay, so you can't give us a single example, correct?
I think I answered that. I can't recall one way or the other as I sit here today.
Okay, and included in that is that you can't give us a specific answer, right?
Objection asked and answered.
I think she answered as best she could.
Okay,
So
how
we're
about
gonna move on
retaliation
from there.
complaints? Do you recall any retaliation complaints?
I mean, I cannot recall any specific retaliation complaints, discrimination, attendance case. I mean, I see hundreds of them all the time. I just cannot recall.
So it's your testimony today that you can't recall a single retaliation complaint with any specificity.
I'm not sure exactly what you're getting at. I don't want to say I have never recalled that there being one. I literally cannot recall a case on that topic. That doesn't mean there haven't been. I just, as I sit here, I cannot recall with specificity any of those cases.
Great, thanks for that answer. Can you recall any specific case at all?
Objection asked and answered.
No,
Unless
first
he's
we
talking
talked
about just
about
any case
discrimination.
In
whatsoever.
general,
Then we talked
are you
about
talking?
retaliation, and now we're talking about, do you have any specific knowledge of any specific case whatsoever?
Thank you for the clarification.
Great.
You know, I can't. I mean, probably an investigator could answer that question better than me. I just can't recall any.
Okay, and even though you proofread them, you can't recall a single one.
No.
Okay. Do you see the screen here?
I can.
Okay. The date I see is 6/21 of 2020, is that right?
Yep.
Okay. And your name, you're copied on this email?
That's what it says. Yep.
Do you read all your emails?
I do.
Okay. Do you read all the attachments to all your emails?
I do.
Okay. So you read this Deputy Lucky meeting of 10/22/19, correct?
I'm sure I did. Yep.
Okay. Do you have a record?
I'm sorry, can we identify the document, please?
Absolutely. That's my Exhibit 61.
Thank you.
Okay. So do you recall that Deputy Lucky meeting attachment, or do you need to have your recollection refreshed?
I don't recall. I mean, all I saw was the top part of the email where you have my name, the date, and who else got it with bullying. That's all I saw.
You see this document here?
Is this document 38, Counsel?
Sure is. And we'll do 39
Thank you.
too, I'm sure. You see the document?
I do.
Okay. Do you recognize this document?
I don't recall that document.
Okay. Do you need to look at it to refresh your recollection?
If you want to go all the way through it, and I can read the whole thing.
Great.
But
Let me know when you need me to scroll.
so what's your question?
Does this refresh your recollection?
As to if I remember seeing this?
No. As to the nature of this documented complaint that we're talking about.
It does not refresh my recollection as far as. No, it doesn't. I mean,
Okay. So it's fair to say, though, on February, let's see here. So on June 21st of 2020, you had read this document, right?
Yep, that was sent to me
On or
on
about
that
time?
date.
Okay, so it's fair.
And not that date there, in 2019, but the other date, 2020,
Right.
right? That's the attachment that you just showed me,
Okay.
correct?
So right. So in fact, the attachment is regarding an incident that occurred 8 months earlier. Correct?
That's what it appears to say, yeah.
Okay. Is that unusual to you in any way?
I don't know.
No. Okay. So do you recall that if in June 21st you received any other complaints from Mr. Lucky?
If I received any,
Yes.
I don't recall any others.
Okay.
And like I said, I don't recall as I sit here today, I got it because it's an email that was sent to me, but,
Okay.
I don't recall that email.
And you can see this email right here. This is an email authored by Mr. Lucky and sent to several Sheriff's Department employees. Is that right?
Right.
Okay. And that was also sent to you in the email string, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to read this here, and it says, just for example, in the second paragraph, I am told to have thicker skin. Being black on patrol is so difficult. I have so many other instances documented and was brought to management attention. But the answer is maybe it's you and it gets brushed under the rug. Do you see that?
I do.
Okay, and you get that information at least on June 21st of 2020, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so what is your duty, if any, when you get a race complaint brought to your attention?
An investigation would be opened,
Okay.
and I believe that's what happened here.
Say that again, please.
And I believe that's what happened with
Because
this case.
your recollection is refreshed or something else?
No, because I had told you before that I do recall that there was an investigation that was done with this, and because I specifically recall what I have said now for the third time about day books, and I just thought it was a strange response. So yeah, I absolutely remember that there was an investigation done, but like I said, I don't remember a whole lot about it as I sit here today, except for what I said to you before, because it was so odd.
Okay, and when you see here that he says being black on patrol is so difficult, do you see that?
I did see that. The what you just showed me.
Okay, and do you believe that to be a race-based complaint or something else?
No, that would be possibly a bullying, a harassment, racial discrimination. Yeah, all of those.
Okay, so it could be more than just discrimination. It could also be bullying and harassment. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and it could have been more things too. It could have morphed into other rules violations. Absolutely.
Well, it did morph into other rules violations. For example, Mr. Lucky got charged with insubordination several times. Isn't that right?
I'm going to object. There's no foundation for that question, and I believe it misstates days of testimony now.
Okay. Are you aware, Ms. Zillig, of insubordination charges that were brought against Attorney Lucky? I mean, Mr. Lucky?
As I sit here today, I recall his termination case. I don't recall exactly what the rules violations were in that case. But again, I didn't investigate them, so.
Right, but you do proofread the investigations and review them, correct?
Again, I see hundreds of these every year.
Okay. So again, I don't think we got an answer to my question, but what is do you have any duties when you receive a race-based complaint?
I believe it was asked and answered, but
We
just for the record.
investigate them.
You have a duty to investigate that, correct?
The sheriff's office will investigate those, absolutely. Those can lead to lawsuits. It's our policy to maintain a workplace free of those issues. Absolutely, we'd investigate that.
Before we move on, I just wanted to remind everybody of Ms. Zillig's
Yeah,
4
13
p.m.
minutes.
deadline.
Yep.
Yes. Thank
Do you
you.
need
Thank
5
you.
extra minutes, or are we right on 4? Where are we with that, Ms. Zillig?
4:15 at the latest.
Okay, we'll do 4 then. I don't need to stress anybody out. Okay. So now we see here that there is this conversation with Mr. Novotny that he says that he has with you. Do you recall that conversation?
I do not, I'm sorry.
Okay. Do you recall whether or not you had authorized any investigation into Mr. Lucky's bullying complaints prior to ordering Mr. Novotny to order his subordinates not to approach or attempt to deal with Mr. Lucky's complaints?
Objection Foundation, she just testified she doesn't recall. Also, counsel, what document is this?
61.
Thank you.
I would sustain that. She did testify that she doesn't recall.
All right. Do you see this document here?
I do.
Okay. Police Services Bureau Patrol Division. What does that mean?
That's the division that Inspector Hughes commanded.
Counsel, is this document 38 again?
38. Yep.
The one that she's testified she doesn't recall?
No, the one, right, but that she testified that she read.
Well, I just read it, and I skimmed it as you were running it through in front of me.
No, I'm sorry, ma'am. You testified that you read all your emails and all the attachments to your emails.
I do.
Yeah, okay. So we know that you've read this email. If you need my help in refreshing your recollection, I'm happy to do that. But so you
I think
don't
we've already had
recall
testimony.
this email that you received. Is that what you're saying?
I'm sorry.
We've
What?
Okay, so I guess the question is, you don't recall receiving this document via email specifically today?
I don't recall. I don't recall specifically getting that email from whoever sent that on the first page as I sit here today.
So that's Catherine Trimboli. So did you let's take a look on this. Deputy Lucky cited examples of people picking on him when he started in the academy at 2017, that he felt like his classmates were picking jokes at him, including leaving a dead bee near his area, and that he knew he is and that they knew he is allergic to bees. Did I read that right?
Yes.
Okay. Based on your knowledge of the bullying and harassment policy, is that bullying or harassment?
The bee? The bee comment?
Well, there's picking jokes at him, including leaving a dead bee near his area, and they knew he was allergic to bees.
It could be.
Okay. And are you aware of any complaints that Mr. Lucky made regarding a Barbie doll being placed in his work area?
I believe that was part of the complaint that he made. Yes. I believe that was part of the complaint that he made.
Okay. And then was that with Tromboli, or was that against Byers or something else?
I don't recall that specific, but I do recall that he did make a complaint about a Barbie, but I don't recall specifically. I believe that's the complaint he made that I mentioned before, that was investigated, and with his daybook comment. I believe as part of that investigation.
With his what comment?
The comment that I said that what I remember specifically from the investigation that was done about him saying he had multiple or numerous or a ton of instances that he wrote down in his daybook that documented all of everything, but then when asked to bring it, he wouldn't do it. And he mentioned something about because he doesn't want to turn that information over because he's going to sue the county and get green bucks or something. I had mentioned that a couple times earlier.
Okay, but you didn't mention your knowledge of the Barbie doll earlier, correct?
Well, because you just kind of refreshed my recollection of it now that you just mentioned it.
Thank you. So, what result, if any, resulted in your belief that Mr. Lucky refused to turn over his daybook?
I recall that as part of that investigation because I don't recall that really happening before with somebody who wants to make a complaint. They usually give all the information so it doesn't frustrate the investigation. It was unusual, that's why I remembered it.
Okay, did you take any action based on that information?
I didn't. What do you mean? What information?
The green bucks, you keep saying.
I don't know what you mean, what your question is.
You understand the word taking action, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and you admit that you received this information. So my question to you is, did you take any action upon receiving this information?
About what he told the investigators?
Yes.
I did not take any action.
Okay, even though you learned about it.
I guess I don't understand what action.
Well, did you authorize an investigation into his complaints?
Oh, into Mr. Lucky's?
Sure. Let's start with that.
I mean, I don't know what, I mean, I don't understand your question. Can you just ask it specifically as to who, or?
No, I'm going to ask you the question I'm going to ask you. So what I said was this. Did you take any action upon learning about the Barbie doll complaint that Mr. Lucky made?
Again, I don't recall specifically. I do recall there was an investigation opened into whatever his complaints were at that time. There definitely was an investigation open. I don't remember the specifics of it.
Okay.
I conducted.
No, but you authorized it, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so you knew the specifics at that time when you authorized it, correct?
Yeah, at that time, sure.
And you knew the specific, are you aware of any disposition or outcome of that investigation? Actually, I'm going to ask you to stop. Excuse me there. I just want to be clear because I want to make sure the judge understands. The Barbie doll investigation, and the green, all of that stuff is sort of rolled into one. Do you understand who the complaint was against? Well, no, I really want to put it a step away. Is this the same complaint as the Frank Gladney complaints, or a different set?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
I don't recall that. I'm sure Mr. Lucky's complaints he made would have been investigated.
Okay, how do you know that?
I don't recall how it was all. I don't know if they were separate. I don't recall.
Okay, but it is fair to say that if there was a if the personnel, PSD, to follow your terminology, had found that there were charges, that would have come to your attention, correct?
Well, PSD doesn't find charges, just the sheriff does that.
Sure, I
So-
might suggest potential rule violations then.
Right, yeah. I mean, if a case is investigated, I will know that it's being investigated. That's your question.
Right, because you both authorize the investigation and then receive the summary of the investigation, right?
Yes.
Okay. Seems like this is a good stopping point for today.
How much time do you want further if I can change my
We're going a little
plans?
slow here. I was hoping we could go faster, but I anticipate about another half an hour or so.
Do you have time during the day tomorrow, Ms. Zillig, that you will be available?
Tomorrow is a very bad day, which is why I'd almost cancel my appointment and keep going.
Yeah, I'm certainly flexible.
Can I try and just deal with this and see if I can? And maybe we just finish. I mean, we've got hours of finance committee in the morning, and it's a very long day. I could maybe do it again at 4 tomorrow. I'd rather just finish today if I can rearrange my.
What's a good word, please?
Ms. Zillig said that we can go forward.
Great. I've got a 5 o'clock stop myself, but let's not press that. Okay. Okay, can you help us understand? Let's put it like this: a employee can make a complaint to of bullying. Wouldn't want to deprive you of Mr. Lucky here. So an employee can make a complaint to Professional Standards Division, but they can also make a complaint to HR. Isn't that right?
Sure, they can do either of those.
Or both, right?
Or both, sure.
Okay, and you can make a discriminatory complaint to both HR or to Professional Standards Division, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. Do Professional Standards Divisions investigations ever preempt HR investigations?
Can you define preempt?
Well, do you put the HR investigation on hold or otherwise defer to the Professional Standards Division?
I think it just is case by case. If it's not necessarily like a rules violations, if it doesn't rise to that, I think HR typically will handle them as employee relations related. If they are related to our policies and procedures, then we handle them.
Who makes that
We
determination? Oh,
investigate.
excuse me. Did you finish?
Yeah, I was finished.
I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry. So, who makes that determination, if you know?
Who what?
Who makes the determination if it's handled by HR, if it's handled by Professional Services Division?
Well, like I said, we handle, if it's a policy violation, we will handle them. HR does not investigate any of our potential policy violations. We investigate our own, our PSD division does.
So HR doesn't, in fact, investigate discrimination policy violations, correct?
if it's a violation of our policy, we do. If, like I said, if it's more along the lines of, you know, a complaint that might not give rise to that, you know, more employee relations related, like since employees aren't getting along, or, you know, somebody, I don't even,
Okay,
can't
but
even.
it's fair to say there are two
Exactly.
tracks, right?
There can be, yes.
Okay, and who's got control of the switch of which track it goes on?
We have control over our own workplace violations, so we have control over our policies that we believe somebody violated.
And when
So
you say
we
we,
have control
who
of
do you
that.
mean?
The Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office, we violate all of our potential policy violation cases. We do. HR does not do that.
Okay, so it's fair to say, who makes the determination if it's a uh, sheriff's policy violation as opposed to a county policy violation?
The county policies give rise, so our policies are incorporated into the civil service rules. So it's really a little bit of both.
Explain
Because because, you know, if a case ultimately becomes a case, then when the case, let's say, ultimately goes to the PRB or the WERC, we're proving a violation of civil service rules. So our policies fit in under, you know, specifically of the civil service rules. It's Rule 8, Section 7, I believe, sub L, you know, any violation of any policy procedure. So all of our policies would fit into that civil service rule. And also other county civil service rules, our employees, like any other county employee, can violate civil service rules. So that's ultimately what's being determined.
Okay, and so the problem I have in understanding this, and hopefully you can help me out here, is this. I understand that you're saying that there's things that affect which track they go on, but I understand that you're saying if there's a WERC complaint or a PRB complaint, right?
Right.
Okay, but those things happen after the fact. So what I'm trying to find out is before then, how do you determine which track it goes on, HR or professional standards?
We don't necessarily determine a track. If if we get notice from an employee or a supervisor, this behavior, you know, may have violated this rule, we will look at it and decide where we are going with it on any potential policy violation. And what I said was, on situations where there's most likely not a policy violation, it's more of an employee relations issue between two employees who maybe just aren't getting along, but nobody's violating policies, then HR handles the employee relations issues between employees that don't involve policy violations.
So I think we got that. The question really is who's making that decision?
I don't think a decision, I mean, we know when we have a potential policy violation, I guess it's, maybe you're just misunderstanding, because it's not like HR is sitting there with every potential policy violation.
Sure, but there are some cases where HR and the sheriff's department both have concurrent jurisdiction, for lack of a better word, right?
I don't think so, because HR, again, they don't investigate our policy violations, so there is no concurrent jurisdiction. They will not investigate policy violations.
Well, do you investigate, does the sheriff's department investigate its employees for violations of general county policy, including the civil service policies?
Can you say that again? You kind of mumbled in the beginning. I didn't hear that.
Sure. Does the sheriff's department, this is the only thing we're trying to figure out here, and I just want to make it as simple as I can. There are two sets of policies. There's the sheriff's internal policy and the HR, the county's policy. It seems like one is enforced by HR to a certain extent, and the other is enforced by your office, correct?
No,
Okay,
No.
what's wrong about my statement?
we investigate our own policy violations and corresponding civil service rules.
Okay, so that was my question. You investigate both the county's civil service rules and the department's, sheriff's department's internal rules, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, but in contradistinction, HR only investigates the county's general civil service rules as opposed to the sheriff's department's specific rules or something else.
No, I don't. The HR does not, for the sheriff's office, the HR does not investigate civil service rule violations either with the sheriff's office.
Okay, so it's fair to say that if a sheriff's employee makes a complaint to HR and it's found to be actionable, meaning above, I guess somehow you decided it was a petty squabble between employees. You haven't told us how you figured that out yet, but at some point the sheriff's department takes over and the county doesn't take over, correct? Or the HR doesn't take over. Isn't that right?
If an employee makes a complaint to HR about somebody in our agency who they feel is, violating a rule, then yes, HR will give it to us to investigate if it's a potential rules violation. Because, like I said, they don't investigate any sheriff's office rules or civil service rules as it relates to the sheriff's office, because we have a division that specifically, like every other law enforcement agency, has an internal affairs division, and that's what their job is.
So if Mr. Lucky made a race discrimination complaint to HR, that wouldn't have ultimately been addressed by HR. It would have been brought to your office, correct?
Yeah, I mean, if it's a rules violations case, yes, including discrimination, harassment.
So if
Yes.
he alleges that his sergeant calls him nigger and threatens to pop him one in the mouth, how would that be handled?
That should be handled by our agency.
Was it handled by your agency or something else?
I don't know. I don't even know what you're talking about.
You don't recall Mr. Gladney being punished and reviewing the documents for Mr. Gladney or participating in the hearing for Mr. Gladney, the disciplinary hearing for Mr. Gladney regarding him calling my client nigger and saying he was going to pop my client in the mouth. Is that right?
I don't recall that specifically. I mean, if you show me the case file, and it might refresh my recollection, but like I said, I don't remember that case specifically.
Okay. All right. So we saw part of this document before, correct?
Yep.
Okay. And then it says on October 16th, the Professional Standards Division was initiated relative to Sergeant Frank Gladney. Chief Legal and Compliance Officer Molly J. Zillig authorized this investigation. Is that true?
Yep. If you scroll to the last page, we can see if it's, signed off on and it's, a case.
Would that help refresh your recollection?
No, it doesn't, because I can't, I would have to read it.
Okay. So do you see that it's alleged that Sergeant Gladney threatened to physically harm a deputy and use profane, inappropriate language? Do you see that part?
Yep.
Okay. Do you see anywhere that it uses the word race or discrimination in that sentence?
Members of the public are dishonest, disgraceful conduct.
So I see here, it is alleged that Sergeant Gladney threatened to physically harm
Harassing, yeah.
a deputy. You don't see.
No, I'm still threatening, intimidating, coercing, harassing employee supervision and offensive conduct. It's alleged that Sergeant Gladney threatened to physically harm a deputy and use profane, inappropriate language.
Okay, can you answer my question, please?
What is your question?
My question is, you see the penultimate statement there on the screen?
The penultimate question?
It's a sentence, yeah.
Which line
So
are you
to
referring
identify
to?
that, it says, it is alleged that Sergeant Gladney threatened. Do you see that?
Yep,
This would be the ultimate, this would be the penultimate. It is alleged that Sergeant Gladney threatened to physically harm a deputy and use profane, inappropriate language. Do you see that?
yes.
Okay. Is anywhere in there, do you see the term discrimination?
I don't see anything on that page, no.
Okay. And in fact, even on the top, it is alleged that Sergeant Gladney violated Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office rules and regulations. You don't see the term race discrimination anywhere in there?
No.
No, in fact, there's no mention of race discrimination at all, correct?
I don't see that.
Okay. You've frozen. So now we're going to look down to these charges. Do you see these charges here?
I do.
Your camera seems to be going out, ma'am. Okay. So I see 32.5.9. Do you see that?
I do.
Standards of conduct. Are those the sheriff's rules you referred to earlier?
Yep, those are the sheriff's rules and then they correspond to the civil service rule L, refusing or failing to comply with departmental work rules, policies, or procedures.
So it's fair to say that those two, the sheriff's office rules and the civil service rules, are analogous there, or something else?
Well, they're not analogous. That rule, standards of conduct, is the policy, procedure, or rule that's identified in L, because the PRB does not uphold our policies. They uphold civil service rules. So our policies, like any other county department, if you use a policy for your case, you're referring to civil service rule 7, section 4, 1, sub L.
I can't tell you how helpful that is. I appreciate that. So the standards of conduct, are any of those incorporating those D, F, J, and it looks like
I don't know. We have hundreds of rules. I don't know what those are off the top of my head. You'd have to show them to me.
Okay, but do you believe any of them to be discrimination or race retaliation?
I don't know.
Okay. Would,
And I don't,
would you
yeah,
like to see
I don't know.
race discrimination and retaliation policy? Would that help refresh your recollection?
I'm sorry, I'm confused. Are you asking me what those policies are that are alleged there under standards of conduct?
No. I'm asking you if, sorry, any of these standards that you see, standards of conduct D, F, J, and O, possibly Q, are any of those related to discrimination or retaliation?
I don't know.
Okay, would it refresh your recollection if I showed you the policy on harassment or retaliation?
Sure.
Okay, let's do that then.
For the record, I still do not have a copy of the policy that he's using.
Okay. I appreciate that, and if you recall, I tried my best to cure that by at least making you those available on the screen. I don't think they were very long, but I will try to send that again. I can imagine that's frustrating.
I
So
just
again-
tried to forward it as well.
I appreciate
Thank you.
that. Thank you.
So any questions on this, again, would be subject to verification of the authenticity of the policies.
Correct.
Thank you.
And this, to be clear, enforcement of this policy is ultimately one of your jobs as both chief compliance officer and nominal head of the Professional Standards Division, correct?
What head?
Nominal head.
Nominal head. I don't know how to answer that question.
All right. Well, how about as Chief Compliance Officer? Aren't you charged with knowing and enforcing the discrimination and harassment policy?
Yes.
How are you able to do that if you don't know what the harassment or discrimination or harassment policy is?
Like I said before, I haven't memorized every single policy that this office has.
No. Okay. And how are you able to be the Chief Compliance and Legal Officer if you don't know where in the policy the discrimination or harassment or retaliation policies are?
Where they are?
Correct.
I know where to find the policies. I pull them up and I read them.
Okay. So, based on your knowledge of the policies that you don't have at your fingertips, but you have at your disposal, do you believe that this is an accurate reflection of the policy?
I don't know. You gotta scroll down and see what the date is on it, and
Great. I see copyright Lexipool LLC 2021/0920, all rights reserved. Do you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then it also said, who is Lexipol LLC?
Lexipol is a company that assists law enforcement agencies with writing policies.
Okay. It says published with permission by Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office. Is that right?
Yeah, it says that.
Okay. Does that mean that these policies were copied verbatim from Lexipol LLC or something else?
No, every policy is crafted to adhere to Wisconsin law and, other specific instances, county ordinances.
And that's part of your job as the Chief Legal and Compliance Officer, correct?
Yeah, I'm one of many people that review these.
Okay. But is it, as Chief Legal and Compliance Officer, is there somebody else above you who reviews these?
We work with, the sheriff reviews them. We work with corporation counsel. Sure.
Okay. But at the Sheriff's Department, you're the highest attorney employed by the Sheriff's Department. Isn't that correct?
I'm the only attorney who works for the sheriff's office.
Okay.
That's correct.
And these are the Sheriff's Department's policies, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. Did you add this statement with stat, open paren with stat section 111.31 close paren? Did you add that?
I haven't the slightest idea.
Okay. Do you recall working on this discrimination? Well, let's just back up. In 2029, September of 2029, what job did you hold?
I was the chief legal and compliance officer of the sheriff's office.
Okay, the same job you hold now, correct?
Correct.
Was it fair to say at this time that you, being the only attorney for the Sheriff's Department, helped advise the Sheriff's Department on making these policies?
It depends on which ones, because corporation counsel reviewed these two, and there might have been times where they did specific ones and I did other ones.
Do you have any confusion on what policy we're talking about?
I'm the one that you have up here?
Right. So that one specifically. When you say
depends, I don't have a recollection if I'm the one who put in that parenthetical, if that's your question, versus our attorneys that work for us in corporation counsel. I don't recall.
Okay, when you say attorneys who work for us at corporation counsel, what do you mean?
Because we're a Milwaukee County department. Every department in Milwaukee County government also works with corporation counsel attorneys.
Okay, but by work with, do they supervise you or something else?
No, they don't supervise. They give legal advice.
Okay. So is it fair to say that you are the lawyer in charge of this policy matter?
I'm not in charge of this policy. I help draft it. By statute, the sheriff sets policy. So, right. I mean, I worked on numerous policies, like I said. but I can't recall specifically if it was me who worked on this one or one of our corporation counsel attorneys who were part of this project.
Okay.
Can I make a point of clarification, Your Honor?
Yes, please. Yes, go ahead.
Is he, so, and I apologize because my notes, not all of my notes made it with me when I had to transfer offices. But was counsel submitting all of 3.14? Is all of 3.14 what's being offered for submission? Or before, I think he had he had highlighted 2. Is it just those 2 policies that are proposed for submission?
Could
The
you
entire
clarify that?
document, including 3.14.31 and 3.14.32. But the entire discrimination policy, harassment, I mean, I don't feel that the, well, let's go into the responsibilities here. All right.
Counsel, I just need to know what you're offering so that I know what to
The entire
verify
document.
this evening.
The entire document.
Okay. Thank you. I
Yep.
appreciate it. That's all I needed clarified.
Great. Did you see this part, Ms. Zillig?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And you see the highlighted part there?
I do.
Okay. And is it permitted for, under this policy, for Mr. Lucky, for example, to try to speak directly with Danita Ball?
I'm going to object. We're still in the discrimination policy, right?
You can see the screen, can't you? We're in responsibilities of the discrimination policy. So we're in 3.14 responsibilities.
So I guess yes is the answer.
Okay. And
Okay.
so, and Ms. Zillig, this policy applies to you personally, right? You're an agency personnel?
This policy, I'm sorry, say that again, what?
The policy, the discrimination and harassment policy also applies to you. Isn't that right?
Yeah, it applies to everybody.
Okay. And including supervisors, right?
Right.
Okay. So, for example, on 3.14.4.1b, you are required to take prompt, appropriate action within their work unit to avoid and minimize the incidence of any form of discrimination, harassment, or retaliation, correct?
Right. The supervisor in any division should make sure that this is, we maintain a workplace free from discrimination, harassment, retaliation.
Great. But in fact, they've got a positive duty, right?
The supervisors in the divisions?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. In fact, they have to ensure by policy, they've got to ensure that members who make complaints or oppose any unlawful employment practices are protected from retaliation, and that such matters are kept confidential to the extent possible. Is that accurate?
That's what that says, yep.
Okay. Is that what the department does?
Which department?
Which department do you work for, ma'am?
Are you referring to the agency here, or separate departments within the?
Fair enough. The sheriff's agency.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, and that would include. Do you know who Mr. Smoot is?
Yes, he is an investigator in the professional standards division.
Okay, so in the course of, and you supervise him, correct?
No, I don't.
Well, do you know who Mr. Novotny is?
Yeah, Captain Novotny is his supervisor.
And you supervise Mr. Novotny, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so then you also supervise Mr. Smoot, correct?
No, not in our chain of command.
Why, if you supervise Mr. Novotny and Mr. Novotny supervises Mr. Smoot, why don't you supervise Mr. Smoot?
I'm not his day-to-day supervisor. I'm Captain Novotny's supervisor, and I oversee the PSD, but I'm not the supervisor of the investigators who work in PSD.
Okay. But it's fair to say that you've got supervisory authority over Mr. Smoot. Isn't that true?
Just like I have supervisory authority over a lot of people in the sheriff's office.
Great. So based on that supervisory authority, are you able to inform me that if in the course, and as your management over the professional services division, are you able to tell me that if Mr. Smoot was made aware of any unlawful employment practices, including race discrimination, what would his responsibility be there?
He would have to look into those.
Okay. What about retaliation?
Well, retaliation also.
Okay. And what if Mr. Smoot and told Mr. Novotny about complaints of, let's say, discrimination in the workplace? What would Mr. Novotny's requirement be?
Can you say that again?
Sure. If Mr. Smoot informs Mr. Novotny about potential discrimination or retaliation, what would Mr. Novotny's duty be?
They would probably request more information into what's happening.
But it's not a probably, right? They've got requirements. Isn't that true?
Well, they do, but again, it just depends on what the complaint is.
Okay. Explain to me how.
Well, if it's, something that, again, is more, I guess, well, how do I say this? If there's something that can give rise to that rules violation, then it will have to be looked into.
Okay.
But, okay.
What about Mr. Novotny when he was the supervisor of the patrol division? If he learned about any race or discrimination complaints, was he required to follow this policy as well?
Everybody should follow, yes, everybody should follow our policies.
So that includes Captain Tromboli, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. What about the patrol division supervisors?
Everybody, yes, if they're employees of this agency.
Okay. How about the deputy inspectors?
Objection. She said everybody.
Yeah.
Asked and answered.
Okay. Can we get to the point?
Okay. Oh. You can see me. You can see this document now.
No. There we go.
Okay. So
Which document is this, counsel?
This one is 58.
58. Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Of course. You see this document here?
I can see part of it.
Okay. Great. And you received this document, and we've been over this before. But now, based on your review of this policy here,
I received this document. Is this part of the email chain?
Precisely. It is, and unfortunately, there's several versions of it. But will you accept that's true, or do you want to see the whole document?
I don't know if I've, again, I didn't see my name on there, so I don't.
Okay. So you'll admit with me that this is your name here, Molly Zillig, and you got all this email string and you read all your emails, correct?
Absolutely.
All right.
Counsel, what document are we on now?
61.
61, 61?
61.
Thank you.
Okay. So, and as we already established here when we discussed this before, his comment that being black on patrol is so difficult should have triggered at least bullying, harassment, and possibly discrimination concerns, right?
Possibly.
Yeah, okay. So, under your understanding of the policy, Mr. Kaznarich was required to report this, isn't that right?
Report this.
She was, Mr. Kaznarich was required to take all the action described in the policy after receiving this email, correct?
They should have addressed this, yeah. And I
Okay.
mean, isn't this what you
So
said
Sarah
before?
Byers also should have addressed this issue as well, correct?
Yes.
And Frank
Or-
Gladney as well?
Or, like before,
Okay.
this should have been moved forward to PSD.
Okay. But what we have here actually is a email saying that they are not to, you're violating this policy, right? You say, you tell Mr. Novotny to tell all the patrol supervisors and everybody else not to approach or deal with, attempt to deal with Mr. Lucky's complaints, correct?
Right, because these types of complaints, like I said, these are handled by PSD.
And that's a violation of policy, correct?
What's a violation of policy?
Your instructions to Mr. Novotny to tell his subordinates not to investigate or otherwise deal with Mr. Lucky's harassment or retaliation complaints as set out in the policy that we've reviewed thoroughly here.
I'm going to
No.
just
No.
object for the record that there's no foundation here, but please carry on.
Objection noted.
Thank you.
These complaints should go to PSD. We don't encourage supervisors to investigate these types of accusations for the reasons I stated twice earlier today.
Okay, but that's not what the policy says, correct?
You'd have to go back to the policy.
The one we just reviewed 5 minutes ago
Yeah,
that you're responsible for as the attorney. That one?
right.
Okay, well then let's do that. If you can't remember what happened 5 minutes ago, by all means.
Okay, Attorney Hitchcock Cross,
I understand.
we can keep some of those comments to ourselves, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. Much appreciated.
Okay, so under this policy, it's fair to say that all of the people that we identified, including all sheriff's employees, were required to take prompt, appropriate action within their work units to avoid and minimize the incidence of any form of discrimination, harassment, or retaliation. Isn't that right?
Yeah, but you're not showing the entire policy, and you're also not showing the, IA policy where about IA investigating complaints.
So is the internal affairs policy, is that made available to general Milwaukee County Sheriff's Department employees?
Yeah, I believe all these, well, the current policies are all online. You'd have to get the ones that were applicable at this time.
The internal affairs policies are all online. Is that accurate?
All of the county's Lexipol policies should be online on our page.
And that includes the internal affairs investigatory policies, is that right?
Personnel complaints, that's correct.
Okay. And so does this policy in anywhere here say that the policy gives way to any other policy? Or for example, the internal affairs policy? Do you see that anywhere in here?
I mean, you got to keep moving.
Okay.
I would object. Nobody can read at this speed. I think if she's asking to be shown the policy, perhaps you
I'm
could
happy
scroll
to
through a
do
little
that.
slower.
Okay. Are we good on this page?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We good here?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We can skip the sexual harassment part, I hope.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Okay. So 3.14.5.2, that would be a reference to what I think you're trying to say. Members of this agency don't dictate what type of investigation process there is. There's a decision-making process that's made depending on what type of allegations are being made. And this was made, a decision was made that this will have an internal affairs review these types of accusations.
Okay.
You know,
For that to be happen, there has to be a determination that the complaint cannot be satisfactorily reviewed through the supervisory resolution process. Isn't that right?
and that was determined by Captain Novotny.
Is
And
that what your
myself.
email to him says, or something else?
No, I'm guessing that's what when you sent that the email that I'm looking at, that's what you're referring to. That nobody is going to talk to any of the people who are potential witnesses because internal affairs is going to investigate it. Isn't that what the email you showed me says?
Okay, and then we read down here, it says members who believe they have been discriminated against, harassed, or retaliated against because of their protected status are encouraged to follow the chain of command, but might also file a complaint directly with the Professional Standards Division, Human Resources, or the Employee Relations Hotline. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. So, Mr. Lucky could have still filed a complaint, but what you're telling me is, in fact, that complaint would have only been investigated through the formal investigatory process because nothing he would have done down here would have altered the fact that you had instigated a formal investigation, correct?
I'm going to object that it's compound to start with.
Yeah, that's a rather long question. Could you break it up, please?
Okay. So, Mr. Lucky was able to afford himself of this paragraph down here that I've highlighted. Isn't that right?
Yes, he could have filed a formal complaint with PSD or Human Resources or the Employee Relations Hotline.
And he could have followed the chain of command, right?
He could have if he felt like he was able to.
Okay. Why would you think he wouldn't have been able to?
I didn't say if he would or wasn't. It's up to him.
Okay. So when we have this email here stating that, let's just stop that. Mr. Lucky, you're saying telling everybody not to investigate his complaints, and he's sending it to Sergeant Byers, Sergeant Gladney, the patrol supervisors, and so forth. Is that following the chain of command or something else?
You got to put his thing up there. I don't know if he was making a formal complaint or he was complaining about everything. I don't know what he was doing. Like I said, I don't recall this. This was 2.5 years ago.
Okay.
I'm trying to explain the portion, the first portion of it with don't talk to people. That is something that is said because of the fact that we're going to open an investigation and we don't want, 8 mini investigations going on, especially with people that he's complaining about.
Okay. But where it says in the formal policy, it doesn't say that that preempts all the other rules, does it?
Does it need to? No, it doesn't say that.
Okay.
We run our internal affairs division and decide the cases that should be opened based on what we are reading.
Well, it's because of that policy, in fact, that you told those people, because those employees knew, supervisor employees knew they had a positive duty to investigate his discrimination complaints. It's because of that policy that you told them not to investigate, correct?
Objection. For the record, it assumes facts not into evidence.
What? You did tell them not to investigate.
Objection that misstates the evidence.
Okay. You told Mr. Novotny here, the guy who's on the line here with us, in the email that we just saw less than 5 minutes ago, that he was to tell other employees that were copied on that email not to investigate Mr. Lucky's discrimination complaints, correct?
I don't recall saying that, like I said, but
sure,
you'd have to ask Captain Novotny because he sent the email. I don't recall that, is what I'm saying.
Okay. Okay, but you do read all your emails, and on this email string from 6/21 of 2020, you received James Novotny's copy of James Novotny's emails to all of the subordinates, copied that Mr. Lucky had sent his complaint to, saying, I spoke with Chief Legal and Compliance Officer Zillig this morning. She emphasized that no patrol supervisor should approach or attempt to deal with Lucky's complaints. Right?
That's what it says, right?
Right, okay. And you were copied on that email, and you read that email at some time, correct?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. Did you ever tell Mr. Novotny that he misquoted you?
I don't, I really, this was 2.5 years ago. I don't recall anything about that conversation.
Okay. Did you ever send him an email saying that he shouldn't have spoke for you in that manner?
In what manner? I'm not saying it didn't happen. All I'm saying is I don't recall.
Okay. Well, your counsel objected to it as facts not in evidence, so we had to re-sow that ground once again. Okay.
I simply do not recall.
Your Honor, if I may, I think it's been established repeatedly that this witness does not have personal knowledge or recollection to provide probative value here. I mean, if he wants to ask in the hypothetical if this is a reasonable thing for Captain Novotny to have done, I suppose that's fine. But since she has testified repeatedly that she cannot provide the specifics or doesn't recall the specific events, could we move on?
Are we ready to move on?
We are.
Attorney Hitchcock-Cross?
Okay,
thank you.
So we've read some of this email. Do you see this here? Being black on patrol is so difficult. Do you remember that from 10 minutes ago?
Yes.
Great. So I'm going to scroll down here to the rest of this email here. And you received this image, correct?
Yep.
What action, if any, did you take after receiving this image?
I believe, now again, this is, I don't recall exactly, but what I do recall is that this is perhaps why Captain Novotny said this, because this gave rise to a situation where it could potentially be a higher level situation that PSD needs to investigate.
Okay. And you see that here, he says patrol is not diverse enough. I never had a black supervisor since my start date, so nobody understands what I deal with on a daily basis. Do you see that?
I do.
Do you believe that is an accurate statement?
Objection. Objection to the foundation of knowledge. Witness can go ahead and answer.
Yeah, I know Sergeant Gladney is black and he's out there. I don't know what shift he worked on,
Okay.
but we have black supervisors out at patrol.
So you've named one black supervisor so far. Are you able to name another?
At patrol or elsewhere?
Patrol is not diverse enough.
Is that your question? Are there any other black supervisors out of patrol then? Now, I don't understand the
My
question.
question: if you could remember another black supervisor other than Mr. Gladney.
Chuck Stowers?
Okay. So, and you also see this statement here that says some people agree with me but fears retaliation. Do you see that?
I do.
Okay. What steps, if any, did you take to protect Mr. Lucky from retaliation?
I'm going to object.
I don't, like I said before, I don't recall. As I sit here today,
Okay.
you'd have to refresh my recollection of something. It's 2.5 years ago.
I also object that stating that there was retaliation assumes a legal conclusion and facts not in evidence. That is the ALJ's determination to make.
I will agree with that, and that is sustained.
Okay. Well, so that's, confusing of the issue. What I didn't say was I didn't ask her to identify whether or not Mr. Lucky had been retaliated against. And nobody heard me say that. What you did hear me say was, what steps, if any, did she take to respond to this allegation of retaliation, or to protect Mr. Lucky from retaliation? As she's
Okay,
required
asked and
to do
answered.
under the policy.
Asked and answered, just noted for the record.
Well, we haven't got an answer.
Yeah, I said like everything else, this 2.5 years ago, I don't recall specifically. I don't recall.
Okay. 1 second here, Judge. Hopefully we can be done.
Yeah. When I came out on patrol and I was dealing with all that stuff, was no.
And I apologize for sitting in the dark, but I'm in not my office. They usually go on automatically, and they're not. And I haven't found another light, so I'm now operating by cell phone flashlight.
You're fine.
Do my best. I apologize.
Oh, you're
I'm
fine.
just happy my overhead lights went on today, because a lot of times they don't even go on. So.
Well, that's what I'm living with right here. I was waiting for the automatic lights to come on, and they didn't. So I'm sitting in the dark.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for your patience. Thank you, Ms. Zillig. It's been a pleasure meeting you, and I'm ready to pass the witness.
Thank you, Rhonda. Much appreciated.
Okay. Attorney Lawrence, do you have questions for Ms. Zillig?
I do. Thank you. Ms. Zillig, was it reasonable for James Novotny? We've talked a lot about email document 61 and Captain Novotny's statement that he had talked to you, an instruction to the patrol sergeant staff. Is that correct? Do you recall that?
Correct.
Okay. Was it reasonable for Captain Novotny to instruct the patrol supervisors to refrain from investigating or addressing Mr. Lucky's complaints in his email?
Absolutely.
Can you tell us why?
Well, we have a division that's specifically devoted to investigating allegations of policy violation These individuals are trained.
Email said he spoke with me.
They have no bias. They do independent investigations. Those are the people we want doing these investigations. And when we do investigations, we specifically tell people not to speak to anybody else. It's within complete normal procedure and practice to do what Captain Gladney did.
Thank you. And Ms. Zillig, was an investigation opened with PSD based on the complaints in Mr. Lucky's email?
Yes.
And do you know the results of that investigation?
She said she didn't know.
What I recall from that, again, it's 2.5 years ago, I recall that there was an extensive investigation and the investigator was unable to ascertain any names of witnesses to anything, as well as any potential work rules violations. But again, sitting here 2.5 years later, I don't know any specifics other than that is what I recall.
Ms. Zillig, do you recall who the investigator assigned to that investigation was?
Investigator Scott Stipp.
And do you believe that he would be able to answer these questions for us?
Yes.
Thank you. Moving to a different topic, you were asked a few times about an investigation concerning Frederick Gladney.
Correct.
And you testified that Frederick Gladney is both a retired sergeant with the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office and the president of the Milwaukee County Deputy Sheriff's Association. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
Okay. When Frederick Gladney is acting as the union president, is he speaking for Milwaukee County?
Objection calls for speculation. Objection,
Are there any
objection,
concerns
objection,
that you would have about...
Objection that calls for speculation. How would she know?
Well, can I finish my question?
No, I object to the last question. I'm sorry I didn't get my that on the record quick enough, but how would she know what Mr. Gladney is, how he's representing, or what his capacity is if he's the union supervisor? There's no foundation.
She gave her answer. She gave her opinion. So we'll move on to the next question. Objection noted, though.
Are there concerns? Do you deal with labor relations specific to the union, Ms. Zillig?
Sometimes, yes.
Okay. When doing so, are there any concerns or guidelines that you need to follow about interfering with or involving the county in union business?
We don't get involved in union business.
And why is that?
Well, because the union is a separate entity from the sheriff's office. Their executive team represents the deputies and the sergeants, and that's their purview.
Ms. Zillig, do you know whether interference with a union business would be a prohibited practice under the Municipal Employee Relations Act?
Absolutely.
Okay. I have no further questions of this witness at this time.
I'm gonna have a few. So, the discrimination and harassment policy, that applies to Mr. Gladney whether he's on or off duty, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And can you tell me what part of union business is calling Mr. Lucky a nigger?
I'm going to object that it states facts that has not been addressed with this witness, so there's no foundation for her knowledge.
So that's couldn't be more wrong. We've shown her, I don't know how many times, the investigative summary. We went over the nigger comment. We went over Uncle Tom.
Actually,
and we
counsel, you did
pop
not.
you in the mouth. So we
That's
did
untrue.
I don't remember that.
Do you want to go over it again?
I think that was the last witness.
And I will note for the record that this has been determined to be irrelevant to this hearing. I'm only asking these questions of Ms. Zillig so that when counsel raises it on appeal, as he has indicated he would, we have a full record to address our objection.
If we didn't go over this investigative summary, I'll eat my hat, but here we are.
I'm not saying you didn't address the investigative summary.
No,
But again, I would argue that this is beyond the scope of cross, that it's
no,
not,
you
there's
just
no
asked him
foundation for this.
about Mr. Gladney's conduct on duty or off duty and whether he was acting as a union official. So that's what now we're going to go talk about this. Okay. So you've seen this document here because
Okay.
I showed you about Molly J. Zillig, Chief Legal Compliance Officer complainant. And I also showed you employee Frederick Gladney, Sergeant, right?
You stopped at the penultimate sentence, and that's where you ended it.
Right. So
with
we've
me.
seen this document, right?
Just,
I would say we've seen parts of this document.
Okay. So let's see this here. Sergeant Gladney called Deputy Lucky, and their phone conversation was recorded by Deputy Lucky. The recording captured Sergeant Gladney asking if Deputy Lucky was calling him an Uncle Tom, to which Deputy Lucky responded, "It seemed like it." Sergeant Gladney is then heard saying, "Nigger, I ain't no fucking Uncle Tom. Say that shit to my motherfucking face." Deputy Lucky can be heard stating that he would, and Sergeant Gladney respond that he wish he would, and "I will bust you in your motherfucking mouth." Deputy Lucky responded, "You crazy," and the recording stopped. Did I read that right?
Objection. As much as counsel loves reading this and stating this in the record repeatedly, the testimony we had on this document before was that Ms. Zillig does not have any independent recollection of the events in this investigation, nor did she participate in the investigation. So any of the details within it, there's no foundation for
Right.
testimony.
So you just asked her about the municipal law and was it interfering in union business, whether that was prohibited labor practice. So now I'm going to ask her what part of acting in a union business is Mr. Gladney calling my client a nigger and saying that he's going to bust him in his motherfucking mouth.
Okay, and I'm noting for the record an objection that I don't believe this witness has a foundation to answer. Please, Karen.
Okay, noted.
I can't answer that. I'd have to review this whole file and go through it. I just, I think showing me one paragraph, I really can't answer your question. I'm sorry.
No, well, this paragraph has all the facts on the question that I'm asking you about. So are you refusing to answer this question or something else?
I would object that that is an accurate statement of the record or the document. There's no foundation for that statement. And that is arguing with the witness.
Okay. I'm going to note the objection. I'm going to overrule it. Ms. Zillig can answer it if she can.
Can you ask the question again?
Based on these facts in this paragraph that we've gone over several times here, are those activities, are those protected labor activities or something else?
My objection is noted, correct, Your Honor?
It is
Thank you.
noted.
Thank you.
I don't know. I can't answer it because I just don't have enough context to be able to say yes or no. So my answer is going to be, I don't know.
Okay. So what more information would assist you in finding out if "I will bust you in your motherfucking mouth" is a protected labor activity?
I mean, I don't know what context this was in. I don't know if it was regarding union business. I don't know. I really don't.
Well, this is an investigative summary that was sent to you in your role as your job here as Chief and Legal and Compliance Officer, and you're the complainant. So you don't know, is that right?
I don't remember. Like I said, this is over a year ago. I'd have to read the whole thing.
Okay, well, my son's waiting at guitar, so we won't have that happen. So, all right, how many times did I ask you about the outcome of Mr. Lucky's investigations?
Objection.
Which ones? His that he made or the ones?
Right, his complaint. How many times did I ask you that question?
About the complaint that he made?
One more time, yes. How many times
Oh.
did I ask that question?
I don't know if you asked me that question at all. You started out asking me about it, and I initially gave you my recollection I had at the moment. Then it was you refreshed it when you showed me the Barbie, and then we kept talking about it, and I started remembering more details that I think I shared with you.
Okay, and how many times did my learned colleague ask you that question?
At the end of this entire testimony, she asked me the question.
And you were able to answer right away, correct?
Like I said, throughout this entire hearing, refreshed my recollection about what parts of this. Like I said, I still don't recall everything about this investigation. I recalled the big part of it that I said in the beginning, and then when you showed me the Barbie, I recalled that.
Okay.
And maybe the bees too. I seem to recall that.
But when I asked you for the outcome, you couldn't recall it. But when Miss Lawrence asked you for the outcome, you could recall it. Isn't that true?
I object to that misstates the testimony here today. Please continue.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't recall that, but yes, please continue.
Is there a question?
Right.
before me?
The question is let's be clear. Why were you able to tell us about the outcome of Mr. Lucky's investigation when Miss Lawrence asked, but you weren't able to tell it when I asked?
I objection that it misstates the evidence. Please continue.
I don't recall you specifically asking that, but like I said, in the beginning, when I answered a couple of your questions, like I said, this was over 2 years ago. I didn't really recall it a lot in the beginning. I still don't recall a lot because I didn't do the investigation. It was a long time ago. But as you and I were talking, I was starting to recall certain things about the investigation when you showed me the emails, when you showed me the Barbie, etc.
Okay.
So-
And isn't your order to the patrol officers and Frank Gladney and Sergeant Byers and others who Mr. Lucky complained to not address his concerns, isn't that a violation of the policy?
Objection asked and answered beyond the scope of cross and lack of foundation.
Well, your first question
Please continue.
was
Noted
trying
for the
to
record.
rehabilitate
Okay.
that issue and said that it was perfectly legitimate under the policy. So now I'm posing that question to her.
Okay, the objection is noted for the record. She can answer if she can.
Can you ask the question again?
Sure. Your instructions to Captain Novotny as a patrol supervisor, not as an investigator, right? Because he was an investigator at that time, right? He's the patrol supervisor, and in fact, Mr. Lucky's supervisor, right?
He was, yeah.
Right. Okay. So you were not directing him as an investigator to tell other people not to investigate Mr. Lucky's complaints. You were telling him as Mr. Lucky's ultimate supervisor on the patrol division not to investigate his complaints. Isn't that right?
No, I was not his ultimate supervisor when he was in patrol. And again, I don't recall that conversation with him at all.
No. Captain Novotny was Deputy Lucky's ultimate supervisor on the patrol division, correct?
That's right.
Right. And he was an investigator, also correct?
Right, and he didn't investigate the case. It was referred to PSD.
Okay. So he would not have had, his role in that was not to investigate, and that's not the reason you told him. It was to inform his subordinates not to further investigate. Isn't that correct?
Like I said, I don't recall that conversation with him. I can, as stated before, I can only speculate. It's because of the nature of the allegations that the case needs to come downtown to PSD, so it's a thorough, unbiased investigation.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, council. It sounds like everyone needs to get going. Thank you, Attorney or Ms. Zillig, for
Thank you.
changing your appointment so that you could continue your testimony here. It's very much appreciated. And it looks like council are anxious to get out of here. So shall we just resume in the morning at 9:30?
Yes, Your Honor, I did want to bring everybody's attention to the fact that the county is bringing a motion tonight. We will do our best to get it on file this evening so we can address it first thing in the morning.
Only Warren
Okay.
Moses at hearings did.
Fair enough.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone. Thank you.